about academic mobility, and this is the definition. Academic mobility suffers from cultural, social, economical, and academic barriers. So this is what we know about mobility, and that's why it was very interesting to, to listen to the perspectives of researchers. What is mobility? Now, I looked into the old documents of the Council of Europe on mobility issues, and I was surprised that, we have, being an intergovernmental organization in all the fields, we have regularly conferences of ministers in this, on that field, and on youth matters as well. And the conference which dealt with the mobility issues, specifically young people's mobility issues, dates back to 1991, 30 years ago. And it was interesting to look at this perspective, what happened in the Council of Europe, and in the world in these 30 years. It doesn't mean that the conferences of ministers didn't take place, they did. And they talked about violence, and they talked about employability, but not mobility. That doesn't mean that mobility is not important for the Council of Europe as a subject. But of course, the Council of Europe looks at mobility through its own perspective, through the perspective of fundamental rights, human dignity, respect for democratic values. So mobility in the Council of Europe view is important, and it's a true mobility if it pursues several objectives. It should be educational, not in the form of the Erasmus, and I think we have here a representative of the president of the Erasmus network. Would be interesting to listen to him too. It's not just for the development of your, educational qualifications. It means that young people who come to the Council of Europe, it's not that just they come and they meet. They are always accompanied by the Council of Europe educational advisors who I would not say channel the activity of young people. That's not the aim. But when young people come to the Council of Europe, representing not themselves individually, but their international youth organizations, the educational advisors of the Council of Europe help exactly to foster that savoir-être, which was already mentioned, the way of being. The way of being open, interculturally open, sensitive, tolerant, being respectful of human dignity. So when they do their own activities, whatever it can be environmental, support, it can be youth exchanges, any kind of youth activities, but looked from the perspective of human rights, human dignity, democratic processes, participation, etc. As I already said, the Council of Europe does not work with individual young people. For example, Leonardo da Vinci, Erasmus, and other programs, they focus on a young person as an individual. The Council of Europe works with multipliers. Why? What does we mean by the word multiplier? Multiplier, it's a youth leader or a youth trainer within the his or her youth organization who would bring that knowledge from the Council of Europe back to the organization, would share it within the organization and in other European activities, international activities, youth activities, and like this would he himself or herself maybe also organize workshops, seminars to promote it to other young people. So it is this multiplier effect. And also the third focus of the Council of Europe, it should be multilateral. It means that, and actually this sounds less exotic nowadays, but when the youth policy started being structured in the Council of Europe, and that happened in 1972, that was really revolutionary. And it is still actually rather rare. It's not unique, but it is rare, because many countries have bilateral agreements of exchange of young people. But what the Council of Europe strives to do is to bring international understanding and international learning, not country by country basis. but really including young people from really very different geographical areas and social backgrounds. And not only for 1 day or 2 days, but for a longer period, 1 week, sometimes 1 month, or on a long-term training program, for example, several times a year. Because what was found out is that, you know, if it is a 1-day training, it is very easy to, you know, to seem tolerant, unconsciously actually. But when you live with somebody, you share the room, you do the educational activities together, you do leisure activities together with people from very, very different backgrounds and geographical areas, then you understand that, you know, deep inside you, we all actually have our own cultural, national values, and sometimes that can maybe not clash, but it's not so obvious, maybe, to live in harmony with other people. So just to summarize, the Council of Europe in its youth sector sees mobility in educational savoir-être terms, multilateral and multiplier. Now, what about how this is organized? As I said, the youth policy sector started to be structured, started to exist as a department in 1972. And we had the first educational recreational center. It is rather famous, European Youth Center in Strasbourg, where exactly young people live together. It's an accommodation center, it's a leisure center, but it is first and foremost an educational center, where young people come, they live for a certain time, they are assisted by educational advisors, and they spend time together, they study together, they do all sorts of things together. Why I insist so much on this educational side? Because you know, just an exchange of young people does not bring necessarily you know, the international understanding and tolerance and intercultural learning. Actually, my boss has told me a story just a few days ago, that in his little community where he lives near Strasbourg, the mayor had the lovely idea to have an exchange between French school children and Italian school children. So that happened, nothing was organized. So the young people came, and it was, there was no, you know, there was no vision. What is intercultural learning, how young people should be together. So it was unorganized. They went to the bar in the evening. Afterwards, they went to the disco. Why not? Then they fought there, and so the result of this intercultural exchange that not only there was intercultural understanding, there was no understanding, and prejudices appear where they haven't been before. So it was exactly the opposite result of what was sought. And that's why the Council of Europe always accompanies the youth mobility by intercultural and educational perspective. So the Youth Center was very popular, and after that conference on youth mobility in 1991 in Lisbon, you know, these are the changes which came in Europe when Central and Eastern Europe changed the political regime, and there was openness, or hope for openness. And it was important to bring young people from the West also to the Central and Eastern Europe, and the center was created on the model of the Strasbourg Center. It was created in Budapest. So there are two educational recreational centers in the Council of Europe. There is also the European Youth Foundation, which was reinforced financially at the same time. The aim is exactly to give small grants, because we don't have much money to distribute. Maybe it's good because you know, the need is the mother of invention, and even with small sums like 10,000, 15,000 euros grant, young people can organize lots of things. And so they can organize it in the centers, which we propose, but they can organize it in their country. The important thing that it has to be, you know, in the field of human rights and values of the Council of Europe, it should be organized with young people, for young people, and by young people, and at least 3 member states should be involved. Usually it's more. And it can be on any kind of subject. It can be leisure, it can be education, it can be political activity. Of course, not extremism, nationalism, fascism, not these subjects, because political activity can mean also that, you know. Then there was the birth of the partial agreement. It was first called partial agreement on the youth card, and especially to help young people from Central and Eastern Europe to overcome the the disparities, economic disparities, and be able to travel to the West. And another thing was the partial agreement is mostly for the governments, because it is a partial agreement. It's an agreement between member states, the governments, and the aim is that the governments help the youth card associations to provide the services of youth cards to young people. But there's a lot of work to do within the partial agreement, and this is also why we have this seminar here, because there are lots of questions still. The partial agreement is there, but there are lots of questions, and we've heard it from young people, from the youth organizations. Many youth organizations in Central and Eastern Europe, for example, don't know how to develop the youth card, where to go further, from what end to start. And the governments do not know how to help the youth associations, youth card associations, to develop this activity. So this seminar would also help the Council of Europe to to get information from all stakeholders. What is important? What is important for governments? What is important for youth card associations? What is important for the youth NGOs who do implement these youth card activities? And there was another unsuccessful attempt to promote youth mobility in the Council of Europe. That was at the instigation of the then brilliant Council of Europe Secretary General Catherine Lalumière, the only woman, I should say, to our disgrace, to the Council of disgrace, that it is in all its history of 60-something years, it is the only woman who was the Secretary General, and she was a brilliant one. It was the idea that governments create and sign a convention for young people, the International Youth Voluntary Service. And that's a lot of work, and that's a lot of engagement from the governments. This convention was created, but it was never ratified, and it was signed by only 2 member states. So unfortunately, it's kind of a miscarriage. From that time, the European Union has taken over this initiative with the EVS and with the Erasmus exchange, but there's still lots of things to do. So I've mentioned in the Council of Europe mobility perspective, mobility field, the 2 youth centers, which are educational and recreational at the same time. The European Youth Foundation, where actually your youth organizations can apply if they have a project, and it's very easy. No bureaucracy. This is really very easy. Then the partial agreement, which is mostly for the governments, and the whole work which we do, which promotes youth mobility. But we are in the same position maybe as governments, as employers, as researchers. It's not enough. So I have given you a very short overview of what the Council of Europe does and how it views the youth mobility. And if you have any questions, please, you are welcome to ask them, or we can also discuss things afterwards. The only thing maybe which I would mention also, it's the visa question, visa problem, because it hampers the youth mobility. People who live in Schengen area do not feel, fortunately for them, I'm very lucky not to feel what it is, but for people who live outside the Schengen area, it is a real torture, lots of humiliation, and at one point, you know, you need to be really very, very perseverant to continue to want to be mobile, because after all the things you have to go through, sometimes you just think, well, I'll do something else. And I think, well, visa question is a very complicated question. It is something which governments, it is the government's responsibility to solve it, but I think that if we look at this from different perspectives, that would be also interesting. So thank you very much, and if you have questions, please either ask them now or you can come back to me, and that's also my aim, to discuss individually with all of you the experiences and you know, your thoughts, your ideas. So thank you very much.
Thank you. Let's basically hold the questions, and we'll have time for questions.